If you are interested in learning how to build a successful HIT business using isometric protocols and technologies, you will love this episode. Lauren's still here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for growing your HIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 496. And today we welcome back Brad Thorpe. Brad is a multi-patented inventor and founder of Isophit, which is a global leader in isometric strength training with 29 plus years in the fitness industry. In 2006, Brad became one of only 21 professionals to earn both the RTS Mastery and MAT Certified Specialist designations. And since launching Isofit in 2015, his methods have impacted thousands across 38 countries, serving the US Army, rehab clinics, spas, fitness studios, sports organizations, and fitness enthusiasts. Brad, welcome back to the podcast.
Lawrence, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, no, I am too, because our theme today is building a business based on isometric protocols and technology. You and I have discussed at length the exercise side of what is isometrics and all the different nuances of using that technique in training. And I'll put those two podcasts in the show notes. But today I'm really interested in digging into the business application and how we can help my audience use isometrics to enhance their business potentially. So I wanted to lead with this question. If you were opening a studio, like a boutique studio, 1,000 square feet, something like that, offering only Isofit as your primary product, describe your business model. How would you build that business to make it as successful as you could?
So first and foremost, for your audience out there, what Isofit is, it's a motion restraint device that focuses on isometric exercise. And the value of isometric exercise is it's the foundation of all movement. So you can't actually move a muscle without generating isometric muscle tension first. So we're very, very fortunate in the sense that we have such a broad array of audience that we can target. We can target the rehab sector. We can look at cardiovascular health. We can look at a seniors population. We can look at a postpartum environment where you're looking at getting moms back into physical shape. And we also live in the sport and performance world. So in one studio, you can cater a ton of different sort of applications depending on who the audience you want. So the financial upside would be isometrics is new, right? Which is, there's going to be some challenges there that we'll get into in a little bit, with sort of convincing the movement-based world that isometrics is good, because there is issues with that. The yoga community has seemed to overcome that quite handily, to be honest. Pilates, which is globally hugely popular, they've overcome that by convincing people to go slower and be more mindful associated with muscle contractions. And obviously the audience that we're dealing with the high intensity audience, you guys are already going really slow because you're based off Arthur Jones's principles. I'm just asking you all to go slower and try harder. So it's kind of really interesting. So our principal demographic that we tell Isofit users, business users, to go after from a demographic perspective are women over the age of 30. And the reason that we go women over the age of 30 is because they're ready for change, right? Their bodies are starting to transform a little bit from, being a younger woman to, oh, I'm in my 30s now. Things are starting to look a little bit different. And injuries, potentially, if they've been in the exercise space or sport performance space, are starting to add up. And what happens is at the age of 28 years old, humans start to shrink a little bit. So that's how I know it's like, well, until people start to shrink and they start to get looser and they move, it's like loosening the bolts on your car and you move. Well, it doesn't work so well. You take your car to the mechanic to get fixed. So we have the 30-plus-year-old woman that gains us access to husbands and boyfriends and peer network, which is great because women are extraordinarily awesome at bringing their friends to small group training sessions or class environments. Men, on the other hand,
That's a great point.
Tend not to be very good at that. They're more, I want exercise in isolation. I want to do this, CrossFit, different breed of human, but cult-like. But so they added the competition element. So we'll touch on that later.
Do you find that to be true cross-culturally in terms of the women being far more open to bringing their peers versus the men?
Oh, yes, by far. And it's women, what we've seen over the years of research and experience, they like to explore and they're more accepting of new ideas. Men tend to be very narrow-minded. They think lift heavy things, put it up, put it down. I got to sweat and grunt, is what it is, traditionally speaking. And to have a male take instruction from anybody, it tends to be pretty interesting. Once they get older though, so a male like coming into Isofit will usually be above 50. If they're doing it on their own decision, and that's usually health related. Like they've had some sort of surgery, they've had sort of a health scare, whether it's cancer, a heart attack, or a stroke. They're usually not speaking going, oh, I'm just going to go source isometric exercise. And, so they tend not to do that. Now, our other side of the audience that we gravitate to are sport teams. And so we do get the male through athletics, right? So you're getting them in a team environment where they already have an established team and you're pulling that team in. And we're very, very successful in the sports space where, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the fact that we work with the world's strongest, fastest, and most gifted athletes. And you can go through our Instagram, profile or see on our website.
Yeah, I saw you, weren't you? Didn't you have that really tall lad, the French basketball player for San Antonio? What's his name? I can never pronounce his name.
So Victor Wembanyama. So we supply Team France.
Right.
Now, Victor Wembanyama went through the Leon Asphil organization, and that's an organization in France that is owned by Tony Parker. Tony Parker and the Leon Asphil was the first ever professional sports team to ever have Isofits. And that's going back to 2017. So do I know if Victor used it when he was going through the program? It was in their facility. We'll phrase it that way. But I did wake up one Friday morning during the Olympics going, oh my God, there's a photo of Victor Wembanyama using Isofit.
Amazing.
On social media. Oh my God, it was probably one of the greatest days I can.
Did you see a good response to that?
Oh my God, sales blew up.
Really?
Sales absolutely blew up. But more so for me, I no longer have to tell anybody who is under 7'5" that the product doesn't fit them.
Yeah, he's just enormous. Yeah.
Oh my God. He's such a talent, and I've never met him. I've never worked with him directly, but what I've heard, he is just a sensational human being. And, to have him tied to my product to some level, like obviously there's no financial relationship with us, but it's still awesome. And, and we see that across the board. So we have Victor, one of the world's greatest sprinters, is using Isofit. Some of the world's strongest men, like literally the guys in competition for world's strongest men, are using product.
That's a great testament. Yeah.
Yeah. And due to other contractual relationships that these individuals have, I can't afford, to write that check as of yet. A couple of years down the road, we will. But one of the things in the world of sports, so American football, so it was just announced 3 days ago now, that one of our Isofit users was the comeback player of the year for college football. So he had shoulder surgery, he had knee surgery, and he basically, so how it works in US college football, you have your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years. So he had a breakout season in his sophomore year running for 1,400 and some odd yards, which is extraordinarily good for college football. He injured his knee, injured his shoulder, missed most of his sort of junior year, transferred to a university called University of South Carolina. And one of their sort of strength and conditioning consultants has been a fan of Isofit for years. And this guy named Chip Morton reached out to us, and we've had conversations. I'm like, well, I know I can help this kid. Like, that's not an issue. So we started working together, and they got some Isofits in, or I think it was July. And then the season kind of starts in September. So I believe he missed the first game because he was still getting conditioning. And then, he's come back player of the year.
Amazing.
So that's the level of impact that we can have quickly. And there's other components when you're looking at rehab. So it wasn't just, he only did Isofit.
Sure.
But when it's a key component and you're looking at injury prevention, so for your audience out there who is dealing with individuals, when you're looking at a rehab model, like where I said Isofit fits into rehab, isometric exercise and isometric training historically lived in rehab.
Yes.
So why don't we look at that every day? You walk in, I believe you're injured. Okay, cool. Start here. So what we tend to focus on from a business perspective is, how do we maximize the result of the individual in front of us? How do we make it more cost effective for that consumer? Like when I was still doing personal training, I was $250 an hour. And people were like, well, that seems to add up a lot. And it does add up a lot. I'm not able to help a lot of people. Now, I full-heartedly believed I was doing a good thing by charging that kind of rate. I was. Then I went over to a model where I started using 6 machines. Oh, well, then I went to charge $30 per half hour times 6 machines. So now I went to $180 per half hour. So instantly, by changing my thought process, I want to work with one-on-one. And I want to work 1-on-6.
Mm-hmm.
I drove up my income. I drove it up from $250 an hour, which I had a hard time finding and expanding my business, to who doesn't have $30 an hour. So
Sure.
Now my clients, and what I would do is I'd convince them that, isometrics is really important. Exercise is really important. They do know that, and they obviously experienced the isometrics and felt it was important. So I would tell them to come in for 3 hours per week. Right. Okay. So they went from spending on average $500 a week to $180 a week. They were seeing me more frequently. The result, if you're seeing your trainer more frequently, is dramatically better. So all of a sudden, they went from having results like aesthetic, physical, because you're really only seeing somebody for 2 hours a week, to I took 3 hours a week and I expanded that over 6 days. So now their ability to screw up their diet, to be less accountable, went away.
Yeah.
Because they're showing up every day. And whether they tried their hardest or not, it didn't matter. They showed up.
So it was like half an hour, 6 days a week or something like that.
Correct. Absolutely. Right. And so let's say that, I can't make I can't do 6 days a week. Okay, cool. Come 5.
Yeah.
So now I have, instead of twice, I'm now having 5 touch points with my trainer. Yeah. So community was able to build. Now, for me as an income, I took the risk of saying, you know what, I'm currently making $250. I'm happy to work for $30 per half hour if only one person showed up. But the way in which you speak to the customer, the way you outline their plan, they were on board for at least 5 days a week.
Right. So what were you doing when you were at because you don't do any personal training now, it's all focused on Isofit, right?
Correct.
What were you, when you were at your most successful in your personal training business? Can you reveal what you were doing revenue wise?
Before I went strictly isometric, my best year was about 375.
Okay. As a solo trainer?
Yeah, as a solo trainer.
Yeah, not bad.
It wasn't so bad. And it was like...
That's English for very, very good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And
British.
I took 9 weeks off that year.
Mm. Yeah.
So I was charging a lot of money. I had low expenses. And then from there, it was just like literally, I had a 400 square foot apartment, 400 square foot gym in my apartment that I was renting. I was just very, very fortunate. I had an 1,800 square foot apartment and set it up. So basically, I had a 400 square foot gym in my apartment. So we had a free motion dual column functional trainer, Concept 2 rower, and basically Bowflex Select Tech dumbbells. And that was it. And I was doing a form of therapy called muscle activation techniques. So that was a driving force into the business from a therapeutic perspective. And then once you're able to sort of help somebody, they don't usually leave. And then they become eventually your billboard because they are feeling better. So they tell everyone that you're the best. And, every trainer's got that story. Oh, my trainer's the best. It's like, what actually constitutes the best? You like them the most? Or the result that they're actually delivering is actually truly the best? Right. And what outside of obviously that it would be a subjective statement based off a huge amount of bias. But yeah, so basically 375. Then we expanded our business. We went from an at-home business to a 2,000 square foot walk-up to our 11,000 square foot facility now. And we were doing extraordinarily well pre-COVID. And then COVID hit. And, I came to the realization that I no longer truly am passionate about training people anymore. I have a lifespan to Isofit from our patent perspectives. And it's kind of like go time. I need to make that decision. So we went all in on Isofit. We had one of our customers in Ridgefield, Connecticut, a guy named JP. So JP jumped on board, smart guy, educated, had a 4,000 square foot facility where he was focused on group classes and private training and muscle activation techniques. So he brought Isofit in he brought 4 Isofits in. COVID hit. So jump forward from 2019 when they arrived in September to let's go with early January 2021. So they were kind of closed for that really kind of 13-month period where their business was impacted. So between 2021 and 2024, they built their Isofit business up basically just in and around $900,000 US per year. Mm-hmm. And that's using our 30 and 30 exercise model in a group class format. So
we're bringing it back now because I just took us on a massive tangent there with the basketball questions because that's my own selfish agenda. But yeah, you're kind of bringing it back to what would you do if you were opening a studio? I'm assuming it's similar to this case study you're providing right now. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. So what happened with JP? So he brought in his he brought in 4, expanded to 8. And now what he does, so he follows our 30 and 30 exercise model.
That's 8 tables, is that?
Correct. So You're familiar with the larger units. So it's our It's our larger Isofit strength unit. So it takes up about 30 square feet. So it's the size of a massage table basically to give you an idea from a footprint perspective. The benefit to them is, so they follow our program. So they do about $900,000 per year in 800 square feet. And their principal business, and this is what I would recommend, is a combination of group training as well as private one-on-one training. Because our 30 and 30 model, which is 30 isometrics in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So you look at 10 exercises for your upper body, for your core and your lower body. And the contraction time intervals are 45 seconds.
Right.
And then 15-second rest times 30.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, go ahead.
Our instructions push as hard as you can. And you'll hit your maximum output and then you'll ride fatigue. But your perceived exertion goes up. So this is where it really kind of ties into that, high intensity audience where you guys take people to like this ungodly level of fatigue. And so do we.
We try to. Let me just ask you a question on that. So obviously there's a lot of coaching that takes place in a dynamic movement, even on the best and safest equipment, right? So it's a big part of what we do in terms of optimizing the client experience, giving them a workout that's really productive and really safe. There's lots of like cueing and coaching around safety and form, and then obviously increasing intensity. And then there might be some hands-on stuff to provide advanced techniques like negatives and assisted reps and things like that, which I'm sure you know all that very well. Is there a problem with Isofit or any isometric technology where you're literally saying to someone, hey, get in position and push as hard as you can, where there's less need for supervision? Now, I know just having someone stand over you, we know from the literature that that actually improves results, even if they're not a trainer. If they are a trainer, I believe it's better, but without even really saying much. So how do you think about that in terms of the value the personal trainer provides in that context?
The trainer obviously is going to provide the personality, the showmanship, the education,
Human connection,
the
right?
human connection. Hey, Jane, drop your butt a little bit more. So there is some cueing. It's not going to be the same amount of cueing, and the likelihood that they do something wrong versus something different.
Yeah.
Right. So when in the dynamic world, if you're doing something wrong, there is potentially a massive consequence. In the isometric world, you're literally just doing something different. So it's almost like the risk in a high intensity isometric environment is near zero.
Right.
Provided you're pushing into something versus holding a heavy weight.
Yeah.
If you're heavy weight statically, that weight will actually get heavier when you fatigue. So it becomes a high risk scenario really quick. And I'm not a massive fan of this sort of yielding isometrics, which is like, they've now changed it up to holding isometric muscle action, because there is risk, because you can't hold the weight that you need to stimulate the tissue because it's too light or it's too heavy. So all of a sudden, let's say I'm doing like a lunge, or can I hold the weight in my hand? The answer is probably no. So now I have to get straps. Well, okay, now I'm fatigued. What are you doing with that heavy weight that was too heavy to hold? Well, now I have to put it on the ground. And when I go to put it on the ground, was my back and my form and my technique to put that on the ground safe? The answer was probably not, because you're thinking, get this weight the hell out of my hand as fast as you can. Or if it's a bar, did I rack it out? Or if I'm holding a deadlift, like let's say it's a deadlift environment. Well, what happens when, in a traditional deadlift, when you hit a fatigue state, well, your form goes to crap and you put yourself at unnecessary risk. Why do it? I mean, the goal of exercise is to create positive adaptations that actually benefit the human versus, yay, we made them suffer and we hurt them. Yay. Sorry, my goal in life is to make therapeutic intervention obsolete. I don't think we need therapists if you exercise. Just stop doing it stupid.
Yeah,
So
I think many of my audience would agree very much what you're saying there. And also what I'm hearing as well when you talk about the difference in coaching is that potentially, and maybe you can elaborate on this with the case study you were exploring there, the trainer could be, that the labor model could work quite well because the trainer could be less skilled or have a less skill requirement because it's so much safer. And therefore, you're probably going to be looking at compensating trainers less, looking for slightly different individuals for that type of role, potentially. Not always. But that's because that's part of the challenge with obviously a personal training business, especially a premium one, is that the labor cost is quite high because we want to get people that are really good. And depending on and it depends on your brand and your strategy. But if you want, for instance, educated experts, personal trainers with degrees, this kind of thing, who are real experts, like really educating the client. And you can still obviously do this in your model. It's just that I'm just thinking about other ways that you can achieve a good profit margin in this business. Yep.
It's certainly less needed. So with the 30 and 30 protocol, you'll get so there's 15 different elevated programs of intensity, right? Program 1's easier than program 15. Right. And it's progressively staged. It wasn't randomly put together. There was a thought process on the ebbs and flow of adaptation of structure throughout 15 months worth of programming. Now, that 15 months worth of programming, I will give you a script. So that individual, you can sort of say, hey, Johnny, you're a great guy. You look the part, follow script. Do not deviate. Make it a little bit your own, but exercise 1 is exercise 1. Exercise 17 is exercise 17. at your facility, at my facility, at this person's facility. So similar to, say, Starbucks as example, right? People like I love a grande Americano. I don't want to walk into Starbucks every time and get a different brand new drink.
Consistency, right? Yeah.
Right. And with consistency also comes adaptation. So part of the issue with the fitness industry, we get so caught up in creating something novel and unique for each workout for the customer, because us, the trainer, is bored. We're not going to stick with that program for a period of time, where in reality, you could take that client and take them on the exact same program for up to 6 to 12 weeks. And they're still going to get consistent adaptation to that structure, then change the program for an additional 6 to 12 week cycle. So we regress that down to 4 weeks just to help with the monotony. And so what we see with our learning curve associated with our 30 and 30 model is week 1, it's a brand new thing. Oh, there's a level of, I don't know what to do. I'm also excited at something new and novel. Week 2, you get a little bit more confident because it's like, hey, I'm kind of familiar with what's going to go on. I've gone through it, 6 times in week 1, and I'm now at, like, you call it exercise or day 8. So I'm now familiar with it. I know the sequencing. Week 3, you're like, I got this. This is good. So it's now satisfying their ego in the sense that they're going like, this is amazing. I'm seeing extraordinary results. And then week 4, you go, oh my God, I'm crushing this program. This is so easy. And then week 5 is a brand new program and you get slapped down to humanity. Like, basically it's the hand of God coming down and going, yes, hockey individual, start new. And then the cycle starts again. And basically, if you've ever done, 30 isometrics in a row, and most people have not, the level of accumulation of fatigue from exercise 1 to 30 is insane, right?
I've never done that. I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And every muscle is involved in the next exercise because we're training. People will like to say isolation to integration. Everything's always integrated. It's the human body. It's all connected. So if you're looking at creating an intense environment, and what we tell people, contract as hard as you can, try as hard as you want, because it's your workout. So we don't measure outputs. And the literature will show is if you don't measure it, you tend to overshoot your level of intensity, which could be good. It could be bad, but you're working out harder than sort of saying, oh, I want to hit a target of 70. Well, if I hit a target of 70, you keep it at 70. Well, I basically stop at the end because I could still keep going.
Yeah.
As opposed to push as hard as you can. So you might go from a 100-pound effort. By the time you're finished at 45 seconds, you're pushing with 32 pounds, right? So this is 68% drop off in effort, but your perceived exertion, right? It's like doing a massive drop set with like your community, where it's like, yeah, okay, you lifted 100 pounds, now you're at 80 pounds. Oh my God, we're just going to finish and we're going to squeeze out with 20 pounds. And you're going, I'm getting every ounce of contraction out of this tissue. So we can do that in an isometric environment, which is actually a safer way to do it because the loads and the moment arms aren't changing as I go through a range. So, and it's obviously self-led versus here's a weight I think is good for you.
And yeah, no, this is interesting. Just in terms of the novelty, that's really interesting how you described the programming over the various weeks. And that's cool that you provide customers with that, right? Because you do like a certification and things like that, don't you, to help people? What about let's talk about more kind of like medium, long-term retention. Because that was one of my concerns is the question around, is there enough novelty, right? If you don't have some kind of other dynamic resistance training going on as well. Now, I think you spoke on the recent masterclass we did in High Intensity Business School. You said there was like 1 trillion different, I can't remember what you said now, I'm paraphrasing, but you said there was a lot of exercise approaches to using the tools. So how do you think about that? Because I know that's a concern. It's like customers going to get bored of this protocol after a while. Yeah.
It depends on the customer, depends on the goal of the customer. For those individuals that are looking for something, uniquely different than isometrics, right? We have a certain amount of people, like I say, come 6 days a week, and because that's the ultimate sort of goal in my perspective.
And that's the 30-30 protocol, 6 days a week.
Correct. So you're committing to that 3-hour window. Now, individuals are going to say, well, I want to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I want to do my yoga. I want to do my spin class and stuff like that. And I encourage them to go do it. Now, if that's going to be their principal form of exercise, the result is going to be less good. The common comment we usually hear is, I'm better at my jiu-jitsu, my spin, my yoga, all of those other things got better. When those individuals were coming from yoga, spin, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu into the isometric world, they all suck. So the transfer is not, I'm good at this dynamic realm coming into isometrics. There's near 100% positive transfer going from isometrics to the dynamic realm. The reason for that is there is an upregulation of isometric muscle tension before all dynamic movement.
Right.
It governs human movement. It's the natural tone of muscle tissue. So if you're not focused on that aspect, dynamic exercise will inevitably rip you apart. It will injure you consistently and unforgivingly the more you do it, right? It's like if you take a group of runners, so we'll throw them under the bus for a second. So the more you run, the more frequent you get injured. The longer you run, the more frequent you get injured. The higher pace you run, the more frequent you get injured. But yet we recommend running as a method of positive exercise. But nearly 90% of people that run are injured from running. And that's hospitalization injured at least once within the first year of running.
Wow.
And you look, well, why are we even promoting it? It doesn't serve the hypertension community very well. When you look at the sort of statistics on isometrics for lowering blood pressure versus aerobic training for lowering blood pressure, the effectiveness rating is 98.3% for isometrics. It's 40.5 for aerobic training.
Interesting.
Right? So it's over 200% better for isometrics than it is the aerobic stuff. But everyone keeps telling you, go do aerobics. You got to work on your heart. You got to work on your cardio. We have 50 years of data. It doesn't work. It's pretty crap and, to be honest, god awful. So that's another audience that we get to work with is the cardiovascular health audience. And people are going, well, how does that work? Well, nobody ever talked about how the blood gets back to the heart, which is venous return, right? 9.2% controlled by a muscle function. What's the best way to activate muscles? Dynamic or isometric? Isometric. So if I want to actually return blood flow back, I want to lower my blood pressure. If I want to basically widen arteries and increase the thickness of the walls of the tissues, be it your arteries, your veins, as well as your capillaries, do isometrics. So we have all of those benefits. So the monotony, it depends on whether you care about your health. So if we take that individual who, let's say they had shoulder pain, and we get them out of shoulder pain, they're never going back to the thing that caused shoulder pain, right?
You'd be surprised. That rare individual.
There are some special cases out there. But
I can't wait to fix my shoulder so I can go back and do CrossFit again.
Well, one of the master CrossFit world champions is a customer of ours. So he's come on board. And so Maxime is his name. He's out of France. And so interesting guy. So we got teamed up. So we were a supplier to the Orient Express racing team for the America's Cup. So Maxime was one of their cyclists. So one of the guys generating kinetic energy for the bike. So we developed a great relationship through working with the team. And so post competition, he got his Isofit. So they were under a specific training methodology for cycling. And once he got his Isofit, though, he was able to start going through the 30 and 30 protocol. World CrossFit Masters champion was like, this is one of the hardest workouts I've ever done.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. And I can give that same program to a 63-year-old grandmother and it's safe. So it can either be the hardest workout for CrossFit world champion, or it can be as safe for your grandmother because it's always going to match your output in real time. When you get tired, it changes load in your favor, depending on the structure of the exercise. So it's pretty awesome.
You mentioned obviously the ideal 3 hours a week. Now, obviously, as you know, a lot of the people in my audience are training people that are very busy professionals who enjoy training, high intensity training with our my audience, because it's so efficient, right? It's 30 minutes. It's once or twice a week is the typical model, right? And ideally twice a week is probably most effective for most people. But you're talking about 3 hours, which isn't going to work for a lot of people just in terms of the time commitment. So I'm assuming you have a spectrum. So you have a lot of people down one end who are doing maybe they're doing less frequency, but maybe they're pushing harder. Maybe they're doing a minute of, because I know when we were on the masterclass, you were saying how, you go over a minute, people start hating life. Like they get really demotivated. So maybe there's a threshold to what you want to push people to. But yeah, can you explore that more just in terms of the nuances of frequency with some of those busier customers? Yeah.
So with the audience that you cannot convince for various reasons not to come, you still just ask when they show up to give it their all. So the programming doesn't change. So the time intervals are still the same. The effort requirements are still the same. The result is going to be less good or, less beneficial. That said, though, when you start to look at the literature of isometrics over dynamic stuff, you're looking at basically for 1 minute of isometrics, the literature will sort of state is about the equivalent of 6 minutes of training on a selectorized equipment. So even though you only came twice for the 30 and 30 class, you might still be getting, in effect, the equivalent of 6 hours worth of exercise.
6 hours?
6 hours.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. I see how you calculate
that.
Yeah.
On the data. And what we see from a caloric expenditure perspective, a blood pressure reduction perspective, a strength enhancement perspective, that data seems to hold true if you were to sort of say 1 week versus 6 weeks. So we often see the result of a 6-week program condensed into a 1 week period if you're able to do it 6 days a week. Now, if you go, I can only make it for an hour, well, that hour is still just going to be, instead of the benefit of 18 hours per week, it's now compressed down to 6 hours a week. So your result takes a little bit longer to achieve, but it's still, for that busy individual, it's still, in my opinion, and heavily backed by science, a better option. And that I'm always happy to do it, like in comparison, side by side. I'm still yet to find the university that wants to do that, though. Your buddy James Fisher, who obviously I know, I was bugging him. I'm like, let's just do a study. Let's see if isometrics is better. But he's was at that point we just met.
Yeah. But he's curious, I think, is what you said to me. He said he wants to investigate it more. Yeah.
And he does have an ISO, or he does utilize it.
Cool.
A fair. But one of the biggest issues that we do face is historical bias. It's I've invested X number of dollars in an existing methodology of exercise. I've invested years of dedication and time into studying this stuff. I invested countless conversations.
This is like killing your darlings, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you got to be willing to take the dog outside the barn and shoot it in the sometime. It's like, you look at it like, and as you know, I own an 11,000 square foot gym. I virtually use none of it. And the reason for that is because my goal is to provide the ultimate level of training for my clients. And even my investors are like saying, Brad, we invested in this. I'm like, yes, and my methodology, my thought process changed. So, sorry.
Well, they invested in the 11,000 square foot gym you've got. You mean all? Yeah, I see.
So they're like, well, why aren't you promoting the dynamic exercise side? I'm like, well, because this side in my years of research and experience and education, this side's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say I would be happy to get rid of every single piece of equipment in my facility and only have isometrics.
Fair enough.
But to your point, you still have to cater to the masses to a degree. So you either have to go all in or you have to be encompassing of.
Interesting.
Yeah, it the hybrid model is confusing.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Um, you can't be saying one thing's better than the other. You know, we talked about specificity and niche marketing before we jumped on, and I'm probably one of the world's leading experts in the dynamic exercise space. I just choose not to talk about it. But if somebody wants to talk about it, happy to talk about it because of my educational background. I can comfortably talk about it. And then we throw in the layer of something you've never experienced or studied. Well, now we're at a different level because most university programs out there have never discussed anything to do with isometrics more than, oh, it's a type of contraction. It doesn't move. And okay, good. Next subject.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. Right.
You make a really good point. It's like people are really obviously comfortable in their own domains of expertise. And as soon as they are tested on something on the edges they don't know much about, they will often, and I'm probably even guilty of this, we're probably all guilty of this sometimes. It's almost like a human instinct. We just discard it as being not important or that we already know enough about that thing, which is not true, right? There's a whole, there's just a massive load of information that we just don't have or don't know. So I guess as you're sort of describing that, I can think of like individuals I know where there's certain areas within health and fitness where they just won't even explore it, right? They won't even like open their mind to it. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an interesting story. So the other day I was talking to, a world-renowned S&C coach. They believe in sports science. They're so into this world of exercise testing, right? So it's like, oh, you got to measure them. It's all about the data. It's all about the data. It's all about the data. So I asked them to produce some literature on the data that they collected for the cervical spine. And they had zero. This is a professional sport franchise. Okay, so if the data was important and you can't produce data on, I don't know, the thing that houses your central nervous system.
That's coaching folklore, isn't it? That's what that is. It's just, they're just saying stuff that's just...
You check the box and you measured one thing. And as we, alluded to, Isofit can do 1 trillion things. So what data point did you want? And if you're going to bank your career on data that's incomplete, like I might as well just guess a number. It's randomly throw it out there and say, let's say you're doing a mid-thigh pull, which some of your audience will know. So if I throw out a number and say, your hamstring is contributing 43%, there's no way you can tell me whether it is or isn't. So if I, in a court of law, can sit back and say, well, your data that you gave, which let's say you generated 300 kilos, but you can't tell me where it came from.
Yeah, I see your point, yeah.
Right. And it's like, so you got all these guys getting injured. Like, so you guys are over in the UK. So you look at sort of the EPL, the injury rates are skyrocketing.
Yeah, I read your piece on Reece James. It was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Caught my eye.
You look at it and you go, oh my God, like just stop hanging your hat off incomplete data. Measure more or don't measure. And the measuring will take you a century to get through one athlete, and they're old and probably dead. So it didn't matter. So it makes them stronger. But
it was a great article. That we'll link that up actually. So yeah, Brad, this has been a fascinating conversation as always. There's more to cover. We'll have to do that another time. But thank you so much for making the time.
Normally talk about business.
No, I know we go on all these tangents that are really interesting all the same. What's the best way for people to find out more about yourself, connect with you, but also Isofit and see what you're doing there?
Easiest place is the website, isofit.com. So ISOPHIT.com. just send us through a message if you want to get to They All Come to Me, which is great. I post an ungodly amount on LinkedIn in more long form formats, sort of opinions and articles and stuff like that. I enjoy that side. Instagram, we post there as well. So Instagram would be Isophit_inventor. And then we have our main company page, Isophit, so Isophit. And those would be the best places to sort of outreach. And my email at any point, feel free to email me. I'm pretty responsive. So it's brad@isophit.com. If you have questions, if you want to order products, absolutely love to have you guys on board. We're helping a ton of people, which is great. And 3 years down the road, we'll have the market penetration similar to a spin bike. So you can jump on, right? So you can jump on the bandwagon quick and get ahead of the curve.
That's so cool to hear that. Just the fact that you've got, these tools that are promoting such a safe, effective way to strength train that are getting more and more popular. It's so cool. Brad, thank you so much for your time. And again, for everyone listening, this is episode 496. If you want to find it on the website, highintensitybusiness.com. This is Lawrence with High Intensity Business, and thank you very much for listening.